Hey, welcome back to the channel. The more me and Wes talk about the possibility of a Dragon's Dogma 2 becoming more and more likely, the more we thought it would be fun to do a discussion based on some of the thoughts and opinions what we have could be possible for the next coming title. So, in an effort to open that discussion up to the rest of you guys, follow along and insert any comments as you see them. Without further ado, let's get into the video.
So for me and Jack, since playing from 2012 till now, Dragon's Dogma has definitely stood the test of time. And it's funny that the game that we all know and love today, the Gransys, the Bitter Black Isle, all the quests and the different types of monsters, weapons, and armor that we have right now, that's only 40% of the game. 60% of the game was originally cut before it released, so you can only imagine how much content, what they had planned for the game for us if it released the way they intended. So a lot of this discussion today is going to be about what me and Jake think should be in the game, and also if they were going to make a Dragon's Dogma 2, what should be in that game as well. Now, this is simply discussions that me and Jack have had amongst ourselves, and hopefully you guys have a better idea of what we think should be in a Dragon's Dogma 2 after this video. Jack?
Yeah, Wes, getting into a game that has been played across 8 years and is currently always being revamped for the next system, had a Netflix adaptation recently, it's pretty clear that they're moving in the direction of a Dragon's Dogma 2. But just looking at that too, do you think the game is going to benefit if it's a sequel, or do you think there's more to tell and more of a prequel as kind of where this stuff took place?
I think that they're really going to make their money. It's really going to resonate with players if they make a prequel. Reason being is we, as players of the current Dragon's Dogma right now, everyone kind of has a pretty good idea of the cycle and how it affects the world of Dragon's Dogma. However, we don't know how it all started, how it all began. So I think if they really hit that storyline of how the cycle started, the first arisen, if you will, I think that'll really hit home with a lot of Dragon's Dogma's players. What do you think?
I agree. It's just a better way to tell kind of an origin story. I think there's a little bit more breathing room there. That way you don't have to keep referring back to your previous works. You know, there's a little bit more fluidity there. Um, I think that a prequel is probably the way to go, but I could see them going in the direction of a sequel just to kind of show, hey, this is the lessons learned over the past 8 years that we're going to be bringing to a new game. That kind of thing I could see happening.
I could also see them making a complete like remake. For example, we may play in Arisen in a completely different continent sometime during the cycle where we're just we're playing a completely different point of view and not necessarily in Grancis, you know what I mean? But from a completely different part of the world and kind of how they were affected by the Return of the Dragon. I really think with the world they created, man, they can go prequel, sequel, or remake. To be honest with you, and I mean, I'd buy either one. So that's my thoughts on that.
And that's a great subject to bring up because earlier you said that we lost a lot of the game that we were supposed to get, and I think that was that Mercedes's French style area, that Julian's Germany kind of influence that we were going to see.
Yeah, yeah.
Think where you're saying that they'd be able to show us a little bit more facets of that by getting away from Grancis is kind of something that we could see, and we could see that in potential DLCs later on too, like maybe going into more Arabic regions, more Asian regions, more African regions. That would be pretty cool as well.
So yeah, they kind of hit it, man, when they came out with the Bitter Black Isle expansion. It was a themed replayable dungeon that you can just kind of constantly replay over and over again. Monsters randomly spawn over and over again, and it kind of made this really fun, replayable game loop. And it was that particular dungeon with that particular boss with those particular animals or monsters, right? And I feel like if they took that same concept and, like you said, made like a winter or like a really cold Arctic themed dungeon with monsters and bosses particular to that dungeon, or a desert style um, kind of underground kind of pyramid style themed dungeon that's replayable. I think they really could have just kept coming out with those DLCs that gave people more, more things to play with, and just more replayable dungeons. I really wish they would have done that, but I like your idea.
Now, looking at things that they have done, like they added on to the Bitter Black thing, they added on making that MMO, which was Japanese only, Dragon's Dogma Online. They had some good ideas there. But we've also seen Capcom kind of grow as a company for 8 years, especially in terms of their breakout hit on consoles, at least, with Monster Hunter. And when you're talking about regions, that's kind of what comes to my mind. When we're looking at lessons learned by Capcom over 8 years, do you think that they are going to be able to bring a lot of that stuff into a Dragon's Dogma 2 game?
Yes, and the reason being, when Dragon's Dogma came out in 2012, back then they, of course, they had Monster Hunter, but like you said, it wasn't really on major consoles. They were hitting their Street Fighter games pretty hard, and they were hitting their, in my opinion, their super highly milked out Resident Evil series, right? Um, and I think if they, throughout the years and where they're at now, with where Resident Evil is now, I mean, it continues to kind of transform from this, over the top action, you know, game to a more story driven thriller game. Devil May Cry, they've improved on the story elements there, and I think that if they look at their games in the past, and I mean like way in the past, like Onimusha, Breath of Fire, which was an old dragon themed RPG back in the day, and just kind of really hit those storyline elements, that story driven game element. I think they can really bring that over to Dragon's Dogma, combined with the Monster Hunter style combat that they've kind of evolved to. I think they have something really really good there for another Dragon's Dogma game.
I agree. There are some pitfalls that they could fall into for Dragon's Dogma, some missteps, and like what you were saying is they have some great storytellers over there at Capcom with the Resident Evil games, Lost Planet, Breath of Fire, and we didn't really get to see the storytelling in Dragon's Dogma. It felt kind of empty and lackluster when it came to storyline, when it came to dialogue. So if they could take those, not really even lessons learned, like what you said, they had it. They had it, and it just seemed like it didn't really make its way into this game. And that's mainly for having a Dragon's Dogma director. Even though there was good storyline in Dragon's Dogma,
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad.
in Devil May Cry, I should say, the fighting is definitely what took center stage there. So if they can keep hold of that fighting and implement that story, that's going to be where they make their money.
I was gonna suggest to you. I think you had brought it up actually, having more of a D&D type of storyline where you're actually making choices, and those choices affect your character's alignment, and it affects the world around you. I think if they gave your character or your Arisen, a voice and actual choices to make, I think it would have added a lot more to the story as well.
Yeah, if your character could actually talk, that'd be a step in the right direction, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because you're sitting there and you pick his pitch, you pick the voice, and but the only way you really hear that is through grunts and groans and stuff, you know. So it was,
You have a very personalized grunt system in Dragon's Dogma.
yeah, no shit.
Something that we probably need to talk about is monetization, especially since the world's kind of changed in that aspect since 2012. Um, I think they're doing it right with Monster Hunter, but there's definitely some their CEO has said came out publicly and said that they are staying away from the gotcha mechanics that are in most games nowadays. And
Yeah, that random element. Yeah.
so, are there some things that I think a downside would be putting a game store in Dragon's Dogma? They didn't do it with anything else. I think keep it out and just stick with DLCs. What do you think?
The only thing that I can think they would monetize is the Rift crystals, man. I don't really see how they would how they could monetize it any other way. And you really couldn't monetize the Rift crystals in a bad way. They may say, what, you get 1,000 Rift crystals for $10. You get, it's almost like gems and crystals on a cell phone game, how those are priced. I think that's really the only way they can do that. Other than that, there's really not a random game of chance element that you can add to a game like Dragon's Dogma. Unless, and you could agree or not, but I think that they can do some sort of random pawn, uh, machine that kind of just spits out a random pawn with random stats every single time. That's probably the only thing that I can think of.
I think I'd be okay with like packs. Like you could buy a I don't know, something ridiculous like an anime pack. You could buy a assassin pack. I wouldn't think that that would be very egregious, especially if it was more around like the $10, $15 range. But as far as monetization goes, I think stay away from having an in-game store and more have like these packs and these DLCs, and they should be in a good place with that.
If you ask me, it doesn't need to be in there at all. You have a game that you have released on every platform so far: PC, Switch, PlayStation, Xbox, and you haven't had any monetization for it. Then there's no need to put it in there now. There's a reason why you keep re-releasing it. People must be buying it, and there's a reason why you made a Netflix series. There's there shouldn't be any monetization in it at all. But we're like you said, we're in a new gaming world, so we'll see.
And kind of lastly, thinking more along the lines of the pawn system, and it really seems to have worked, especially going on 8 years now. You could say that it's dated, but it's certainly stood the test of time. Do you think now that they've had kind of some practice with the MMO scene that they're going to try and move the next Dragon's Dogma into more of a multiplayer friendly thing to where your friend would actually be able to play with you? And do you think that would help the series or it would hurt the series? What do you think?
I think it would hurt it, man. This might be the one we disagree on, dude, because I think adding multiplayer to it would hurt it. I think it really was on to something with the whole pawn system, and I just think that adding uh, the a multiplayer, like, kind of like Monster Hunter, where you can like team up with four people, I think that would hurt it. I think they really need to keep the whole pawn system, the whole Rift thing, to where you're kind of marketing yourself as a player by saying, "Hey, this is my pawn. This is what they know. This is all the stuff that I've done in my game, and this is how beefy and smart and useful my pawn is in combat." And I think that kind of added just a different dynamic, multiplayer wise. If they did add multiplayer to the next one, I would limit it to, like, you can only have maybe like two players, and they could bring their pawns along to where it's four of you. So for those of you who haven't played Monster Hunter, if you play with two real people in your squad, you have your companions. So it's like four of you in total. But as soon as a third person joins, it takes away your companions, then it's just three of you. So I think to kind of combine the two, it should kind of keep that, but I don't think it should be four people, so it won't be too much like Monster Hunter. And I think that if you had four players on, like four real players on the in a game at one time, it would make the game too easy.
So I am going to disagree and agree with you a little bit, just to kind of give some nuance and some more alternatives here. Uh, I do think you're right. The reason why Dragon's Dogma has such a great gaming community, and if you're not a part of this gaming community on Facebook, Twitter, wherever you can connect with gamers, whether it's an app on your phone, you need to be. It's a great, positive community that definitely helps each other out, and I think it's because of the pawn system. Um, so I think getting rid of it would be a mistake. But I do think having raid style areas, like kind of how the Your Dragon is, that would be fun to do with a party of four. Or if you had a dungeon area like Bitter Black, that would be fun to do with a party of four, so long as that gear didn't outweigh everything you could do without doing it. Because if the end game just turned into that, I think it would turn off the people who like the traditional system. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I would say for a system like that, actually you did make a good point. For a system like that, kind of like an end game or like a separate part of the game where it's like, okay, this is for all four Arisins, but you kind of still had a part of the game where your pawns still mattered. I think yes, there is a way they can do both, and I didn't think about that. Um, yeah, yeah, that was pretty good, man.
Well, these are just some of the ideas that we came up with just talking about Dragon's Dogma. Me and Wes are constantly thinking about ways to improve, the way forward, and I know you guys are excited to get a Dragon's Dogma 2, and hopefully it's right around the corner. But I think that's going to be it for us. Treat 'em rough, and we'll see you next time.